Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to the Grange. My name is Cheryl Connor, and I'm Vice President of Addison County Farm Bureau. And we sponsor these luncheons and breakfasts once a month with the Grange. And we thank you all for coming out on such a rainy, cold day. I'd like to take this opportunity to kind of do a little advertisement for something that is really cool. And the Farm Bureau is sponsoring an agricultural appreciation dinner dance. It happens to be free. And all we ask is that you bring a dessert. It's April 16th. And it's 6:30. It starts between 6:30 and 7. And the horse traders will be playing. So that'll be exciting. And it's at the American Legion, is that right? VFW. There's going to be all kinds of food. And so come, it's free. It's an agricultural appreciation dinner dance. April 16th. You'll see flyers up at several places. They're going to be at Pratt's Store and a couple of other places. I also want to take this opportunity for those of you who are not Farm Bureau members to please think about joining Farm Bureau. There's so many discounts that you can get back what your original fee is on a couple of, in fact, Rouse Tire is one of them, and as farmers, we get that back on the first set of tires that we buy. So everybody think about Farm Bureau. And if you have any questions, you can go right online. Farm Bureau has its own site. So just a few things about reviewing the rules for this. And we're pretty liberal on the rules, but we're going to ask that you ask questions, and you take about 2 minutes to ask a question, and the legislators can respond in about 3 minutes. And we'll be pretty lenient on that. And so if you have any questions, please come to the microphone and identify yourself, please. Okay, so we know, and we'll be filming this. So just wanted to let you know. So is anybody ready for the first? Okay, yeah. We'll have the legislators introduce themselves.
My name is Claire Eyre. I live in Addison. I've been, this is my 14th year in the legislature. I've chaired the Senate Health and Welfare Committee for 4 years. And in the afternoon, I serve on Senate Finance.
Hi, I'm Harvey Smith, and I represent the town of Weybridge, New Haven, and Bridport. And I sit on the House Agriculture Committee. And I've got to tell you, I'm really pleased to hear that announcement about the Ag Appreciation Day, because the farmers that have been contacting me lately don't feel much appreciated.
Hi, thank you. Diane Lanfer, Representative Lanfer. I represent Addison 3, which is Ferrisburg, Vergennes, Panton, Waltham, and Addison. I serve on House Appropriations this year. I've been in the legislature for 8 years now. 6 years on House Transportation and 2 sessions on House Appropriations. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Okay. So does anybody have a question? We're ready for the first question. Please identify yourself. Go to the microphone because it makes it easier. And you have 2 minutes to ask a question. Okay, Tim, you can start us off with a question.
Donna Scott, North Ferrisburg, Vermont, and we've been away visiting our grandchildren for about a month now, so I'm wondering what the situation is on the marijuana issue that's either coming before the legislature or perhaps already has.
Thank you. The legalization of marijuana passed the Senate a few weeks ago, and it's now in the House Judiciary. And from Judiciary, it probably has 2 or 3 other committees to go through. Diane can probably tell you what the mood is there, but was a long time getting through the Senate.
Thank you. I can't speak for the whole House, but I can do my best, and Harvey, you can chime in. But currently, like they said, the bill is in House Judiciary taking testimony, and I believe there's actually an upcoming public hearing on it. But other than House Judiciary, which I do not believe or don't know if it even has the votes to come out of that committee, it would then need to go to House Ways and Means, the Tax Committee, and then from there it would have to come up to my committee in House Appropriations. And at this point, I mean, you can never say never, but at this point there's not a whole lot of support for it in the House, or at least not enough votes that I believe would actually get it out of there this year. Although, personally, I think the subject needs a lot of review, and I have not been a supporter. Many of my years on at the Vermont Department of Health, at the Alcohol and Drug Department, I don't have the capacity to maybe look at it in a totally biased way, although I try to. My other concern on that is right now looking at the state structure for many of the things that are really need our focused attention, cleaning up our lake, taking care of our children, making sure our health care insurance is running up and stuff. I don't believe that we have the chutzpah out there enough to be able to put the structure together to roll this out well right now. All right, thanks.
Yes, Diane covered it pretty well in the House. It is in the House Judiciary Committee, and it's questionable whether they have enough votes to pass it out of that committee at this point in time, but nobody's given you a yes or no answer when you ask them if they support it in the Judiciary Committee, so with the exception of Betty Noel. Betty is pretty clear. But anyways, you know, I know a lot of people first thought that the rural communities could benefit by being involved in growing an additional crop and having it available, but with the Senate bill that came across, that's not possible, and I don't think it is possible, and I think it's a mistake if we go down that road.
So we won't be passing the ball, so
Are there any other questions?
May I have a follow-up to that? When is that public hearing? Or do you...
I mean, I thought I saw something written about it, but it's not.
Thank you.
I'll look on the website to see what we got.
I'm Paul Wagner here. I live in town, milked cows for 45 years and saw the light and I stopped doing it. So on this marijuana bill, of course I grew up in the 60s and that was a big thing. I never participated in that. But the legislators shouldn't even be talking about this.
It's hard to hear. Maybe you need to get closer
Okay.
to the mic.
The legislators shouldn't even be talking about it. It's against federal law. So that shouldn't be on the agenda at all anyway. But as far as that, you know, they say, well, it's only marijuana. Well, I watched a program on marijuana and it says the THC, which is your addictive hallucinogenic drug that's in it, in 1970 it was 1%. They tested the marijuana that the drug dealers are selling and it's 36%. So it's 36 times the drug portion of that. So it's not your grandfather's weed. It's not just, you know, well, it's not a problem. It's addictive and it's hallucinogenic as cocaine or heroin. But the other point, and this was on a legislator's talk program, you know, they link it to prohibition. No, there's no link to prohibition. Prohibition is with alcohol. When you drink alcohol, only you become inebriated. See, and cocaine, heroin, you only use it becomes. When you smoke marijuana, everyone in the room is smoking marijuana. Everyone in the car is smoking marijuana. Same little kids, you know, destroys their mind before they even get to be grown up. So it's not the same, you know, as prohibition. You shouldn't even make that analogy. So I think you should think long and hard and wait till it comes legal on a national scale before Vermont even gets involved in it.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions or comments?
Bill Keys of Bridport, and Paul brought the issue up, so I jump in. I think most of you know how I feel about the marijuana thing. But I was wondering, you know, I've got a couple raised beds. Is it going to be approved so I can start some seeds this spring? but I'm hoping, just hoping, our representatives come to the senses up there, enough of them, that we won't make it a law to have it. It looks to me as though they're more concerned about the tax dollars, as I've said once before, than they are the youth of the state of Vermont. And you know, we have a lot of law-abiding youth out there right now. They don't get it because they know it's against the law. But it's easy to get it over the counter. They're going in with their buddy, and maybe I'll try a little bit. You know, because they aren't breaking any law doing it. And I think it's wrong to ever pass it. And I hope they'll go till we have a decent governor up there that won't sign it.
Bill Scott, also from North Ferrisburg. Just what I heard here today, that as a farmer, if we're going to grow this stuff, I'd like to be able to get in on it. But it doesn't sound like that's going to happen in any respect at all. The last figures that I saw, that it was going to take $10 or $12 million in a 2-year sequence to even get this thing off the ground and before they started making any tax money on it. So I don't think from a financial standpoint we better look long and hard about what's going on. The whole secret to this whole thing, from tobacco to alcohol and marijuana, is that we need to get into school systems and start working with younger students and changing the mindset and trying to get them to get away from following their peers, for one thing, and having less peers that would be influenced by using that kind of material. Get them to stay away from older people too. That might help. But when I was teaching, I happened to work with another maple producer, and turned out that he was telling me his grandfather was using this stuff back in the early 1900s. So I never heard about it until, you know, outside of my college days and so forth. Maybe it was being used, but our fraternity wasn't in that area.
I've heard a couple of questions about how people can grow marijuana, if farmers can get into this and to have it be another crop. There is the bill as it passed the Senate has, I can't remember the details, but at the end of, sometime next year, in the middle of 17, looking, dispensing with permits, giving out permits for producers of marijuana. And one of the very deliberate things in the bill is to make the plot smaller, so it wouldn't be necessarily sort of an industrial scale operation. There'll be a lot of security things and that sort of thing that an operator would have to go through to make sure that the public isn't coming in on a pick your own mission. So, but there is a lot of deliberate law or proposed law around allowing smaller growers to do smaller patches of marijuana.
Since we're on the marijuana issue, I'll just say, farmers, don't be expecting that you'll be able to grow regardless of what the House and Senate or the legislature does. It's against federal law at this point, and so that by growing it or by following a state law, you would be in violation of a federal law. And if you produce milk and receive federal benefits through your production of milk, or if you are on a farm credit loan or anything else with the federal government, I think I would question whether you would want to get involved, because it's still against the law federally. It has to be changed there first.
Thanks, Tim.
I'd like to follow up on that a little bit, and Tim is absolutely correct on that. And I know when we use the USDA services, And as an application form, it basically, on the bottom of that form, it says what you can't do, and one of it's being involved with illegal drugs and marijuana. And you have to sign an affidavit that you don't use it, and it's truthful, and your ability to qualify for any of the federal programs are tied directly to that statement. So I think, Tim, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is important. People need to realize that this isn't a simple little thing that we're dealing with. It has multiple levels and implications of the impact that it'd have on our communities.
Oh, just to keep the conversation going, I'll join in. So I've had many constituents contact me on this issue, both for it and against it, you know, but I hope eloquently back telling them how I cannot support it, even though if I may disappoint them in that, but I don't think that that's going to be something I can support. But the little part, and maybe Claire can clarify this, but what I remember seeing, I've actually had constituents say, don't vote for this, who I thought would probably be for it. And the reason was because in the bill it does not allow anybody to home grow. And so people would not be able to grow, and like Harvey had said, there's quite an application process and about $25,000 to apply to be a grower. And that would pretty much eliminate a lot of people that I know. Thanks.
Hi, Joe Gleason from Bridport. I see a strong parallel between the prohibition of alcohol and prohibition of marijuana. When we had alcohol prohibition, we had tremendous amount of crime associated with it. Legalizing it took away a lot of the crime problem, if not all of it. I'm not sure, but I think the biggest problem with ending the prohibition on alcohol was the fact that every alcohol producer could fill the magazines and papers with emotionally based advertising to promote the use of alcohol, which I think was really ridiculous. And if there is going to be any effort towards legalizing marijuana, I think there needs to be a lot of education to go along with it. I think marijuana has been proven a lot safer than alcohol, especially when it comes to automobile accidents. But I think the evidence is very strong that for young people, and it's all through the high school, I mean, it is so common. I think this is damaging to developing brains. And, you know, we've had in the past all this propaganda about how, you know, it's a gateway drug and everything else. Well, using the same logic, mother's milk is a more dangerous gateway drug because, you know, all the users of hard drugs started out on mother's milk. I mean, that's the logic that they are using. Well, you know, I am not in favor of people using marijuana, but I think we have to take an approach where we can cut down the usage. I think this is really important because we're not doing it at this point. We've got so much peer pressure in the schools, et cetera, et cetera. It's just flowing around like water.
Thanks, Joe.
Deborah Plouffe from Bridport. I'm the one who got up and spoke on the first day about marijuana and the fact that I was hit in a car accident by an impaired driver who just picked up his stash. But did he get any penalties? No. It took me 2 weeks to even get his insurance information. And I only got that because I kept bugging the state police. And he never got arrested for hitting me, you know, impaired. And this was at 8 o'clock in the morning. But I'm worried. I work at a hospital. I see the tests for drugs go through on the newborn babies who have no control over what their mother does. Yet they're coming through with marijuana, cocaine, morphine, whatever. Used to be a rarity, now it's so much more common. And of course, our tests have gotten better. But the problem, one of the problems with marijuana is the fact that you can be in the same room and have a positive marijuana test. Because just because you're not smoking, it's all through the room. And we've tried to explain that to many doctors and parents of children that they've had their child tested. And we said, we can't tell whether they were smoking or somebody in the room was smoking. All we can say is it's positive. We already know the problem babies have if their mother drinks alcohol. And oftentimes they're drinking alcohol at the very beginning of development. And the same can be true of marijuana. And those mothers are coming in still to deliver their baby having had some marijuana before they came, probably helped the labor pains, okay? But not a good idea, because we already know that I believe it goes up to the age 25 where the developing brain is affected by marijuana. And a lot of the crime I think we see, it's not marijuana. They're getting money for heroin and cocaine.
Thank you. So, related to this subject, and one of the things that I really do enjoy about being a part of the Appropriations Committee is that you get to see a little bit, but all of the budgets, and you start to see where relationships are, right? Because most of the policy committees, you dive in, you become an expert in that one area. So I think you've heard me say this before, that if I could wave a magic wand over Vermont, and if there was one wish, it would be to eliminate the addiction problem. Because it is driving up so many of the budgets, all of them. So I don't know how many people here know that they've become parents this last year. Everybody in this room, if you're a taxpayer in Vermont, you just became the parents of 529 new children between the ages of 0 and 5 years old. That is the increase, or the number of children that are now in the state's custody because of addiction to heroin, or maybe others, but mostly heroin. I get very emotional about this because those are just our babies, and we're as taxpayers are now their custodians. We're their parents, possibly for the rest of their lives. We're going to need to clothe them, feed them, house them, love them, educate them for a very long time, not to mention, like you said, mitigate some of the medical impacts on that child. 529 just between the ages of 0 and 5, and that's not counting the others. Those are children that are coming in that we have to care for, and that drives up the budget. The judges, the court system comes in to see us, and they are beside themselves because they cannot keep up with the caseload that are coming in day after day for custody and legal issues around terminating the rights of parents. The backload in there is huge. The Department of Health with treatment, the treatment centers across the state, trying to keep up with the waiting list of maybe in some cases I heard as much as 600, I think we're down to 300, of people just to get into treatment. Providing that treatment is costing you and I a great deal of our own tax dollars, but it is the right thing to do to get our Vermonters healthy and back on track. Law enforcement, the Department of Corrections, the Defender General who has to defend these cases. That's also part of the state process. The state's attorney's office. All these budgets are being driven, not to mention DCF. You just see the child protection package that we just passed in the House. Say that 10 times fast. You know, included 35 new social workers to go out in the field to have to deal with this. It is something that we're trying to wrap our hands around and not just concentrate on, well, we'll just invest in this area. You have to invest in its totality and grab a hold of it, which means we included more defender generals, we included more state's attorneys, we included another judge, more social workers. And it would be lovely if in 5 to 10 years, we don't need that many anymore. And thanks.
Thanks, Diane.
Pamela Stefanik, hailing from far away as Benson. I raised 3 children in this kind of drug community aspect. My children are all drug-free. They were raised in a community. They knew who the kids were with drugs on the school bus. They knew who the kids were whose parents sold drugs on the street. They saw drug deals being made in the village right in front of their eyes, and it's very, very difficult. Now, you raise your kids, they get out of high school, if they go to college, they get out of college, and then they have to launch their careers. They have to become the person they're going to be for the rest of their life. It's probably the most stressful period in a child's life, barring anything before that. They have to pull all their strengths together. They have to find a job and where to live, and does it work for them, and their communication skills and their work skills. And we know that kids are dropping out of the system, and they start relying on state help, and they fail at launching into the workforce as fully involved individuals. My concern is this huge amount of drugs in the community isn't making that any easier. It really isn't. If I look on the television and I see that somebody's paying their rent by housing a drug dealer, these are kids from our community. These are kids who are related to people we've known. It makes it very, very difficult. 30 years ago, I remember going into some of these towns, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that at all. I don't know what's happening to society. I hope it improves, but we're in some very dicey times now.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for the legislators?
I know that I already asked a question, but if I could respond a little bit to some of the things folks have been saying. I've been following the marijuana issue. I was a high school teacher for 23 years, and so I've seen a lot of the drug abuse in the community and what it does to young people. And I think some of the things that we're thinking about in terms of making it, oh, well, because everybody drinks, they should also be allowed to smoke. Well, if we carry that, if we smoke marijuana, I mean, but if we carry that further, well, everybody's doing heroin, so why shouldn't we legalize heroin now? We aren't thinking of the people who are being impacted by it. Smoke, according to the American Lung Association, all smoke contains many toxins, irritants, and carcinogens. And for pot smokers, they generally inhale for a longer period of time. So secondhand marijuana smoke contains the same ingredients as tobacco. And so here we are, we're paying, I think the tobacco companies are paying quite a bit of money to the state of Vermont because of the impact of tobacco smoke on our young people. And now we're going to turn around and we're going to offer them marijuana? I don't understand the rationale behind that. And if you don't think that marijuana is a gateway drug, I don't think we really know the situation, because that's how people get kids interested. You start with marijuana, and oh, well, that makes you feel good. Try something else. This is even better. This will make you feel even better. And before you know it, children are addicted to horrible drugs, and some are even killed by them. I mean, just the fact that we have to give these Narcan shots out to people in the community is a very frightening thing. And there has been a fatal crash where a teen was on pot 35 times the amount of legal marijuana that's allowed in the state of Washington. He killed himself going 88 miles an hour around a corner, and he also killed a man, 47 years old, who was on a bicycle. Every single article that I've cut out of the newspapers that is factual talks about how the police don't want marijuana to be legalized. All the counselors don't want it to be legalized. This is not a good thing in any way. The only thing we'd be doing is selling our children down the line and creating a society that is just looking out for how they can get high. That's our problem now. And nobody's going to want to come to Vermont if our productivity is so bad that all people want to do is sit around and smoke pot or take drugs. We're just throwing our hands up and falling into a very deep abyss that I don't think we can ever get out of.
Thank you. Deborah, I think you're next.
I want to put my 2 cents. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, Joe, wait a minute. Deborah's going to go next.
I was going to change the subject. And the other day I saw our own Maria Audette on TV about the new law that's going to go in effect about not putting food in the garbage to go to the landfill. And I wondered where we could find out more information on that, and maybe because we could all learn about it because it's going to affect all of us.
Marie, do you want to make a comment on that?
Marie Audette. The universal recycling law is becoming a law by 2020. All of us, we will no longer be able to put food scraps into landfills. I've been learning a lot about this lately. I didn't realize how much food we threw away as a country, so that floored me, 40%, considering how hard we work to grow food. So I think the mental state of all of us, we're going to have to get better at moving food to people in need before it has an opportunity to go to a landfill. But, this is also bringing up opportunities. I was just talking with a group of students this morning that came to the farm, and some laws really nudge us in the right direction, and I think this is a good one, because we shouldn't be throwing away so much food. And food is energy. You use the sun to grow this food. You shouldn't be wasting it and putting it in a landfill. And there's a lot of things that are going to grow from this law to make us better at managing our food scraps. And I know that on our farm right now, we're going to work with a company called Casella Organics. Casella Organics is a company in the middle. So if you're making some kind of food or something, you have waste, you call Casella Organics, and they'll repurpose that food. And that's what we're doing. They're going to collect it. First of all, they got to teach the community how to throw away food. You're not going to throw away with your old drugs and this and that and the other thing. It's got to be real food, clean. And they're going to put it in a slurry. And there's several farms with digesters in the area. We have reception pits, which is another thing. After the news story, people say, the farms are going to be like landfills. No. It'll come in a slurry. It'll be fed into our digester. And that stuff is going to get mixed in with the farm, the manure and so forth, and it'll go right back to the soil at the end of the day to fertilize as it should, instead of staying in a landfill. As far as the details of the law, I don't know that much about that. That's right. So what we're working with now, we are so protective of what's going on our soil. When we first sat down with this, we want every test imaginable. We want to know exactly what's in this slurry before we accept it. But, we can be part of the solution. I think it's an easy way to help out society is to take the food scraps, because it's a really minute waste stream when you add, when you divide it up amongst all digesters. And we're going to start not with maybe your house scraps, but with cafeterias, hospitals and schools and universities. And they want to do a better job anyways, so they're happy to kind of learn about this.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you. I can kind of speak on that subject a little bit. It may be a little too soon for prime time, but some of the conversations that I've been having, at the State House, but mostly started in this last summer in Vergennes around biodigesters. Most of you probably have seen in the paper that Vergennes is probably one of the top 3 right now discharge polluters into Otter Creek, and not something we want to be proud of. So we need to take that under consideration. So having done some work or doing some research and talking to people about Vergennes' sewer and septic issue, and then also some of the farm and ag Addison counties, one of the largest ag counties in the state, Addison and Franklin, and from what I'm told, maybe it's just because they want to tell me that Addison is #1 in that, and also talking to people who have had biodigesters and talking about the food scraps. Where do these all come into play? Is that they actually all create energy. So have been having some conversations with people around how can we combine all 3 of that, the septic from the human waste, as well as the manure, as well as the food scrap. into one large biodigester. And actually in today's Burlington Free Press, there was a little bit of an article in there about some of what they're talking about up in St. Albans. So it's not fully developed, but I'm at least exploring and asking questions and seeing how does that fit in our area to actually take care of our phosphorus issues in the lake, take care of some of the municipal septic issues, and what are we going to do with the food piece. My daughter, which I'll put a plug in because I just get to be here, operates 4 restaurants in the area, and I'm going in and visiting with her, and I watch her throwing away things, and I go, I could live fine just on about a third of what is thrown away. And then I think about when I go to the Boys and Girls Club and they're hungry. And you know, we've had teenagers after school, they're not going to wait till 6 p.m. And it's just, I cannot figure out, like, how do we take this food that we're throwing away in abundance with people who are hungry? It just doesn't make sense that we don't connect them. But we can also look at most of them are from the 1960s when the initial federal bump came in to help to put them in. But yeah, Virgins is one of the many across the state that are going to need some real upgrades. And possibly the question is, do we upgrade the system or do we upgrade a biodigester as something different? Well, there's some within the city of Virgins. There's a septic waste tank. In its capacity, which, sorry, I'm going on too long, the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant is fine. It's only at about 50%. But we do have a few outposts on McDonough Drive that are really the triggers for Virgins. Now, other communities like Rutland and Burlington, it's other issues. But just want to let you know that I've been sketchily working on that. How are we going to talk about some more biodigesters?
Yes. Thank you, Marie. It's not surprising to me that Marie and the other members of Blue Spruce Farm are on the forefront of this initiative because they've been on the forefront of so many water quality related and energy related initiatives for a long time. And this is something that's really very important to all of us. It was kind of interesting. I was reading an article this morning in the Burlington Free Press about a project they were talking about up in St. Albans. And a lot of folks have been supporting initiatives along this line to decrease the amount of pollutants coming off the farms by utilizing them in a system like this. And to be quite honest with you, some of the newer systems are designed as phosphorus, and in the end, you basically have a jar of clean water. And so that is, come a long ways from where we've been and where we've gone. But what was interesting when I read the article this morning, so much pushback from some of the same individuals or organizations that were supportive of this initiative and water quality related issues. So, trying to find a solution is not going to be simple. And I will say that the next biodigester that goes in any place, whether it's on a farm or whether it's a combination of agriculture and municipal and maybe a spot to use some of these biosolids, it's not going to be as easy a process as it has been in the past. So as we get to where we are, there's going to be a lot more challenges in solving the same problems. And so we were talking, and I kind of want to change the subject a little bit, not much from this, but agricultural roles in water quality. And we've come a long ways over the years. Again, Blue Spruce Farm has been one of somebody out there on the forefront, try and invest in their own time and money into trying new techniques and technologies and trying to solve some of these problems. And actually, I think, Marie, didn't you get some national recognition for what you were doing? I don't remember the name of the program, but... Sustainability Award. Yeah, so, I mean, they're way ahead of most people in the nation. And yet, they're also going to be challenged with some of these new water quality rules coming down and some of the uncertainty of where we're headed with those. And for the agriculture community, we like certainty. We like to kind of know, we want to know that there's a goal that we can work for, and that goal doesn't consistently move further and further away. So that's a challenge. But when I was driving down, today's a rainy day, so naturally being a farmer, I'm looking at runoff from fields and roadways and parking lots and those other kind of things coming here, and I'm thinking we didn't get a lot of rain, but I see it was pretty easy to see where I could find some erosion, and some of it was coming directly off from agricultural fields, but then I also found places where there was erosion, they were actually coming off from the roadways and the drainage systems for the roadways and coming out onto our agricultural fields without having a good plan in place how to get that water across on some kind of a grass waterway to wherever the outlet happens to be. So I think there needs to be a lot more coordination between, and I think there is, and I don't want to put Adam on the spot, but I know he is in a position to deal with some of these, and I'm not quite sure how far they've progressed in that line, but when we passed our water quality bill, we basically, one of the tenets of the bill and one of the selling points was all in. Everybody in the state was into this water quality issue together, all the way across the board. Didn't matter whether you were a large farm or a small farm, didn't matter whether you were a municipality, a homeowner, recreational user, logger, whatever. Everybody was all in. And now I'm seeing some lines being drawn as to who is in and who is out. And I also saw another article, I think it was this morning or yesterday, about Lower Lake Champlain, where they were getting together with Vermont DEC to kind of talk about the development of a plan in that area. Well, that plan actually extends up into the lower part of Addison County too, anything that would flow into the South Lake area. So I don't know how it's all fitting together, but I know that we need to have an open discussion to make sure that what we're doing is on the concept of all in, and we're working in ways that it's going to be beneficial to improve water quality, but also be cost effective in the methods that we use. Thank you.
One of the reasons, prime reasons I came today is to talk about a subject that keys right into the food waste and human waste issue. I've been a farmer most of my I've been involved in farming, let's say, for most of my 75 years. I've been on the planet here. I am really concerned about, and have been for a long time, about the amount of food that is shipped into Vermont from California, where they're now having huge water issues, and other places. In wintertime, basically things shut down here, and they don't have to. There are many potentials, and one of them is using compost to heat a greenhouse during the winter. And this is where food waste and human waste can come in. Human waste can be used on above ground crops like small trees, et cetera. Now, there's a huge potential for this here in Vermont with all the animal operations. During the winter, there are dairy barns with south exposures which are doing nothing with the heat except blowing it outdoors. Cattle produce a lot of heat. There are various other animal operations. Even chickens can serve to help heat a greenhouse. We've got our share of solar, and with proper storage, we can keep a lot of heat in the greenhouse from solar. But I think the state ought to get involved in this. Maybe VITA would be one of the branches that could help out here by funding some of this stuff. I've talked with dairy farmers who have big south exposure. They say, I can't do this, but you know, with a cooperative venture, you've got veggie growers all over the place who shut down in the winter. They'd be very happy to manage a greenhouse if we can work the technologies out. I mean, the technologies are out there. I was just talking with Dick over here about my friend David Yarrow, who is promoting, it's basically low heat digestion of wood. We've got a tremendous amount of waste wood in this state right now. A friend of mine down in Pittsford runs a good-sized sawmill. He's chipping the stuff up for schools to heat their buildings. and he's got a yard full of logs he doesn't know what to do with, especially in this mild weather. So pyrolysis, which gives off wood gas, and as we were talking about, ran vehicles during the Second World War when gasoline was limited, has a great potential in heating a greenhouse. It has potential for all sorts of things, and when you get done, you've got biochar, which is carbon which can be put back on the soil, which can enrich the soil phenomenally. And of course the compost from the greenhouses, great thing to add in with the biochar. So I mean, I'm only still developing this whole thing in my head and doing my research on it, but I would like to see the state get involved. There are probably quite a number of people out there who are interested in various aspects that would work for year-round vegetable growing, year-round growing of various sorts.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
I'm standing here behind you and I get so excited I just want to jump right out of my shoes because I want to tell you that yes, it's happening and it's real. And people, yes. So some of, but you should be a part of this. I want to talk with you. So,
Another thing to do.
well, so when I just spoke about earlier conversations, there are some ideas that are being presented. And like you said, no one entity in that room has got the I want to say chutzpah or the strength to be able to pull something like that off alone. So everybody sitting in the room knows it's going to take a public-private partnership between many in order to get to what you're talking about. But it is definitely a big goal, and everybody can see this. And part of, I know this is going to sound nerdy, but I know some people, they go, I can't believe what you do on town meeting week. One of the things that I did is my husband and I went for a tour of the Essex Junction new wastewater treatment plant. That's where you take your husband on a date when you really want to impress him, is to take him to a wastewater treatment plant. But you know what, he likes it as much as I do. And why did I go there? Because just 2 months ago, they're just now online, they're using the human waste coming in, and they're capturing the heat to actually heat, and I don't know if it's the building, so I may misquote that, but I know they're capturing the heat, and then it goes over in a tank, and they are creating 150 kilowatts of electricity from it in the digester right there on the plant. Mostly when I wanted to go there was I believed that the process was happening. I wanted to see what it looked like, and because on a piece of paper when I look at data, I wanted to see what it smelled like, because as I think Harvey had mentioned, you can roll out a really good idea and you'll be very surprised at where the pushback comes back from the community. So trying to figure out where would be the negative, where would be the negatives when you start to see something going in a very positive direction. And, but I love biochar. Saw on one of my adventures a demonstration on how that is created. There's a lot of good things going on, but it takes a lot of leadership to be able to pull it all together, and sometimes getting your piece of information and being involved in it, and your input is so important. But what I'm excited to say is that there are conversations like that and places that are actually doing some incredibly cool things.
I want to add one more thing to this subject. And that is something I've talked about several times here, zero-point energy. Now, how many people know what zero-point energy is all about? At least we got one. Well, I talked with one of our local activists, well-known activist, about picking up on zero-point energy, and I showed him one of my inventions that has been proven scientifically to capture zero-point energy. He grinned at me, says, "You want to get me killed?" Well, this is people's concern. Now, I've had an attempt against my life because I've gotten involved in this kind of thing, but that's all right. My troubles will be over if they get me next time. But if people have the courage to speak out on this, educate themselves and speak out, it will be reality. Check out Tom Bearden's website. I don't know if he's still alive. He's had numerous attempts against his life. But he talks about how zero-point has been used in the military since 1962 on the Minuteman rocket. It's out there. It works. And a fellow I know up in Canada, I won't mention his name, he seems to keep a low profile. I guess he wants to stay alive. He heats greenhouses all winter with zero-point energy. Basically, we're both intuitive inventors. Same technology I use, very simple pyramid or octahedron technology, which heats his greenhouses during the winter. It works. But if people would educate themselves about this, instead of looking at me and saying, town wacko, which I know I'm the town wacko, that's all right. Somebody says, well, you're thinking so far ahead of theirs they can't catch up. It's out there. Educate yourself and speak out about it. I mean, if you do it person to person, you don't get yourself killed. When you make too big a splash, you can't.
Thanks, Joe. That was very interesting. Any other questions?
I guess I have one that near and dear to my heart. I was a member of the AGR fraternity at UVM when I was there. And I understand the bill that was produced way back many years ago that granted property tax exemption for fraternities and sororities was up for either redoing again or being dropped. And I know from a standpoint of the university, if it hadn't been for sororities and fraternities, it would have been an impossibility to house people on campus because the university never had enough housing. The other point is with these organizations, at least the good ones at UVM, was the leadership development in college youngsters that was needed to promote them in their life and in their careers. So I'd like to know if any of you people here or have heard of what's happening with a bill, or is there a bill? Are we going to be able to promote keeping our fraternities and sororities and colleges intact? If they have to pay property taxes, chances are they're not going to be able to make it financially.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. That is a hugely important piece of legislation, and it's one that kind of slipped through when we changed some of the tax laws a year ago, or a couple of years ago. I can't remember when we did it, but basically we didn't have a discussion about this. We didn't know what the impact would be on the fraternities and sororities, but I know that there's a bill circulating around in the House, which I think will probably make it through the process to correct this problem. Because I think that in Vermont anyways, without correcting that tax issue, we won't have fraternities and sororities owning properties. And they'll probably sell them to some nonprofit where we won't get any money anyways. So I think this is something that we really need to take a hard look at and fix it.
The bill to exempt certain properties from property taxes exempts properties with pious, charitable, and some other kind of properties. Things like churches, hospitals, granges, and that sort of thing. Several years ago, for 14 years, I've worked with some other people to try to go over the entire list. Millions and millions and millions of properties in the state of Vermont are exempt from property tax. That means that you all pick up the difference. What they don't pay, you pay. And every time we brought up something, a private home, an old home on that, every time we brought up any category, we were bombarded with hundreds of emails, all the same, but hundreds of emails. And fraternities and sororities are no exception. I have to tell you that my husband's fraternity in college was one of the most important things in his life. It helped him to be the man he was, and those friends are our lifetime friends. I understand the importance of them. But if we're looking at exempting groups from property taxes, we have to think seriously, what are the charitable projects and charitable things that we get from sororities and fraternities, and they are less than they are from churches or Grange halls or that sort of thing, schools. And it's time for us to go back. Every politician likes to make sure they guard their constituents' goodies to make sure that they don't have to pay more taxes. But when you look at the big picture, there are millions and millions of people and organizations that are on there that don't belong on there but we try to take care of our own Addison County people and protect them from the taxes. So I won't support that. I was part of the group that looked through the list and thought, who really isn't serving this purpose? Who really doesn't meet this need? That's the only one that we could agree on. There are so many people who had their own interests in their own communities that they wanted to make sure to defend. But I think we need to do a lot more.
Thank you.
So I'm a dairy farmer, so my whole life is water quality right now. It seems like all our conversations are around water quality, new equipment that we're buying, new equipment that we're looking at buying, new ways. I mean, I never would have thought if you told me, you guys 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that we wouldn't plow anymore, I would have been shocked, and I don't think I would have believed you. But it's been 2 years now, we haven't plowed any ground. So, and we're investing in our corn planter. If you want to see it in the shop, it's just been fitted so it can plant corn seed in sod, in grassland, without turning it over first. So, as a and I'm saying this especially for Claire, because I never get to see you anymore, and I want you to know, and I want Diane to know, and Harvey does know, because we made him come to a coalition meeting. Farmers across the board, we have a coalition now in Addison County. And it's not just dairy, it's all farmers, and it's, veggie farmers, there's beef farmers, there's organic, conventional, small, big, medium. And we went into this water quality understanding that we own 40% of the problem. And we are in, and we are working, and the pendulum is swinging. What we don't like is what Harvey was alluding to, is people now, special interests are coming in, well, we're just a small piece of this, and we're not, an acre of soil is an acre of soil, and the same rules have to apply across the board if we're going to achieve the results that we need to achieve. And I really want that message sent across. If you're seeing some pushback, like Harvey was saying, it's because we're saying, wait, you got us to go in because it was all in. Now you're saying, oh no, I don't want to get picked on because I'm a big farm owner with a lot of land. So I really caution that we have a holistic approach that includes everything fairly.
Thank you, Marie.
So I can appreciate that, because we do hear all the sides, and it seems like everybody's doing this. It's somebody else's fault or more fault somewhere else along the line. We take that into consideration, and the data is there. We know, especially when it comes to the lake, where and who and how much is the problem. But I attend our Addison County road foreman across the state, or across our county, is the most organized road crew of anywhere in Vermont, and they're actually very, very well respected statewide, their opinion. They meet regularly, and they invite me to their monthly meetings on occasion, and of course I heard too. That's what I heard, because all the new road regulations for water quality and what's coming out, and now they're starting to just begin to feel it, and I'm sure Adam could probably speak to it more than I can, some of the pushback and not understanding, and of course somebody's first reaction is, but my problem is I'm only this much. All right, well, you're only this much, so you're going to be that much of the solution as well. And like you said, all in, so we have to take a breath with them as well and help them get to that next point. But we do hear it from their side too.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, people need to understand the process which we go through to get to where we are today. And when we passed the water quality bill in the state legislature, we gave directives to the different agencies in the state to come up with rules, to modify the rules that they had to improve water quality. When we passed the legislation in Vermont, we all talked about the all-in piece. And we were there, we were supportive of that. I was hesitant, Marie, I got to tell you that I really struggled with putting more regulation on the farm community, but I know that the farm community was stepping up to the plate and saying, we can do our part, we can be a part of the solution. Then we go through the rules-making process, and that goes through a very public process, and I think on this particular, the agricultural rules that have been developed, they've had more public hearings around the state than on just about any other rule that I've ever seen go through this process. And there was a lot of folks that pushed back for a variety of reasons, that they shouldn't be a part of this because they were too small or they didn't spread any animal waste on their land. And that was taken into consideration. The second draft of the rules came out and modified the original rules that basically said everybody that was in agriculture was part of this process. And now they cut it off with, well, I don't know where it'll end up, but right now it's 50 cows and under. Still have to follow the rules, but they don't have to go through the certification process and be there. Folks that are in the vegetable business that may plow or turn over the land 2 or 3 times a year, regardless of what size they are not covered. So I can fully understand and appreciate the frustration from the farmers that sat at the table and said, this is what we need to do, and we're willing to be part of it as long as everybody else is part of it, as long as everybody else is going to follow the same rules. And when we were talking about the all-in, we were talking about municipal roads and all those pieces, and there is something to happen there, and I'm hoping that Adam will step up to the mic and kind of explain a little bit what might be going on in that area, because a lot of the towns have been pushing back because it is going to cost them more. Taxes are going to go up in order to cover. They need to get permits for the same things that they've been doing for generations without a permit. So it is, you know, the cost of everything we do is going to go up, and there is, you know, some pushback, which is kind of, you know, what we all expected. But I think as we have in this open dialogue, that we get it right, because I'm kind of frustrated, to be quite honest with you, that we spent hundreds of millions of dollars over the last 20 years to improve water quality on the agricultural side, and yet we haven't seen any reduction in phosphorus levels in the lake or entering the lake, and it's concerning to me. And you know, I constantly ask the question, are the practices we follow in the right practices? Are we investing the state and federal dollars in the right place to get the kind of outcomes we're looking at? And hopefully with, you know, the Addison County Coalition and the other groups, watershed groups, got together and helped pass this piece of legislation, knew and understood that, and they were asking the right questions and knowing that we were going to have to make some changes, but hopefully those changes are going to head us in the right direction. Thank you.
Thanks.
I just want to correct one thing that was said. I think it was said that granges are tax exempt. They are not in the state of Vermont. We have to pay taxes unless the town agrees to let us be tax exempt. It's decided on a town-by-town basis. And we have our Grange Camp, which I know pays how much in taxes? $6,000 in taxes. So a lot of our fundraising at the state level has to go towards funding those taxes. So don't think the Granges are included with the fraternities and sororities, because they're not. And I think we do, if not more community service than they do, we at least do as much.
You were waiting. You were up there before I was, so go ahead.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm Adam Lucci. I'm director of the Addison County Regional Planning Commission, and a couple, Harvey and Diane, have both hinted that I should talk a little bit about stormwater and municipal issues. So I'm going to try and tell you where basically the water quality impacts on your local road foreman, your local roads, and therefore the property taxes that you pay. By, I think it's 2017, the Agency of Natural Resources is going to come out with rules for what they are calling a general stormwater permit that will affect all of the roads in your town. So your town is going to need to apply basically for a general stormwater permit. That permit will govern how your road foreman basically fix the roads. They'll need to set some priorities. Where are the most erosion-prone areas in town? Where are the places, not only are your roads worse from a transportation point of view, but where are they worst from a a water quality point of view. Is there a place by a bridge or by a river that they wash out more than others? And that would become their priority to fix first. So ANR is still making the rules for that. So it's a little bit of a time of angst for your road foreman because they don't know what the rules are going to involve. They don't know what they're going to have to do. I will say, Diane said your road foremen are very organized. It's absolutely true. They are out early and often looking at their roads. You know, Bridport, where we are, I know has been out looking at all your culverts and doing a culvert inventory this year. Panton just did one this year. So basically looking at it from a transportation perspective. Is it passing enough water so it doesn't affect the road? And from a water quality perspective. May I go on for just a second? Okay, thank you. So your road foremen are out there early and doing it. We are working. We, the Regional Planning Commission, are out helping them with some of the technology to look at culverts and look at road segments and look at bridges. They will have 20 years, basically, to implement those priorities under the general permit. So it's not going to be bang, bang, bang. I think the agencies recognize that it took a long time to create this problem, and they can't fix every single priority in the first year. So they are going to have 20 years to work on it. It will be culverts, it will be road segments, you know, that are close to waterways that have the most impact on those waterways. So I hope I answered your questions as best I could right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Okay, I wanted to go back to what I was saying about zero-point energy briefly. I have an invention on the drawing board which will produce heat. I haven't finished it totally, but I am trying to keep my head above water doing construction in a very down economy, very largely roofing. That's what's available, and that doesn't work in the winter. Nowhere near as much fun as it was in 1954 when I started doing it. Anyway, I could use venture capital if anybody has any ideas, one way or another. I mean, I've got some pretty interesting technologies and innovations, but I've got to get them off the ground, and I'm struggling to survive right now rather than developing the things I ought to be doing. So if anybody has any ideas for me there, I would appreciate it. The other thing I wanted to mention, again, I don't support the idea of people using marijuana. However, it is ubiquitous. It's all over, just as common as alcohol. And I know people who have been very heavy marijuana users for decades, never had an automobile accident, they're very productive, they don't have any breathing problems, so, you know, I have to turn a skeptical eye to a lot of the claims. Like I say, I think it's particularly dangerous to kids. I see a lot of problems with it, etc. But I think we also need to address alcohol, which I think is a much bigger problem.
Anybody else with a comment?
Just a simple question. You hear that agriculture is 40% of the water quality problems. What are the counties and roads as a percentage of the state? I mean, I just have no idea.
Gayan Murphy. I'm with The Independent. I write about the environment and agriculture, and I've used this pie chart a lot. Let's hope I remember it, but you can go back and search in The Independent from when the changes came out in August. But the researchers at the EPA and the state have done different charts for every watershed. And so what's most helpful for us is if you look at our watershed, because everyone is different. Everyone has different proportions of phosphorus from different sectors of the economy. So I'm doing this from memory, so please double check it. But remembering the Otter Creek and then those farms that are closer to the lake that are in the Mackenzie watershed, For us, the pie chart that we've run with My Stories repeatedly showed about 50% agriculture. A very small slice of that is, where your animals are. The larger slice is fields, right? Pastured and plowed. About 20% is logging because we're so forested, so we have a lot of logging. About 20% is municipalities and roads. A very small proportion in Addison County is wastewater treatment, only 1 or 2%. But aside from ag, the three biggest that I remember, because ag's half of the pie, are roads and forests, and then other kinds of what they call developed lands, which could be running off your roof, running off a football field. Does that seem about right? That's what I remember.
Yeah, on the sources of phosphorus running into the lake, the one number that I remember is because they've added it to the pie chart because we kept consistently asking what percentage of the phosphorus going into the lake came from stream bank erosion. And that's out of, that's for the whole Lake Champlain Basin area, drainage area. It's not just for Addison County or a stream in Addison County, but it's around 23%. And 23% of stream bank erosion, that 23% is an area that nobody wants to touch. They think that that's natural, that that's going to occur. And, we have a lot of pushback for a variety of reasons, from armoring any of the banks to prevent that from happening. We do have a program in the state, is the buffer program that we have that agriculture can sign up for, and that will, what you do is you agree to a 35-foot setback, and in some cases maybe more than that, where you have a no-cut zone, and allow that to grow up to vegetation. But that still doesn't get at the stream bank erosion. It prevents animals from entering the stream and furthering the erosion, or agricultural operations from getting close enough to the stream so that there's erosion that from the fields that further erodes the bank. But the natural erosion that's taken place in those streams is ongoing, and that's a concern to me that we're not willing to address that. Especially, there's a lot of streams where we could do armoring and wouldn't really impact that at all, or the natural flow of the water. There are some legitimate reasons why armoring hasn't worked in places in the past, but I just wanted to bring your attention to the fact that 23% comes from that source that we're not really willing to tackle.
Excuse me, Harvey, so what you're saying is the farmers are spending a lot.
Can you stand up and go to the microphone, because no one can...
So what you're saying is the farmers are spending a lot of money. I know the Audettes lease some of my land and they do things there, and that's for 40%, but the state is spending no money on 23%?
Well, I'm not saying no money. There's very limited money that's going on there. I can give you several of examples in Addison County where there's been stream bank erosion for most of my lifetime, and I know that they have tried to find dollars to fix those areas. I know there's one spot that's probably over a quarter of a mile long, and the stream has eroded into the field probably 100 to 150 feet of a 15-foot stream bank. That's a lot. And yet there aren't the financial resources, the wherewithal, or the desire to address those. I mean, that's the largest one I can think of. I know there's some that are larger. When you go down Connecticut River and you see some years, you see 15 or 20 feet back from the river where the field used to be is gone. So you know that it's happening in a lot of different locations. But no, we don't have a program to address that on a consistent basis.
Thanks, Harvey. Yeah, I agree that there's actually some significant money in the transportation bill and some positions to support at the regional planning commission's level that had come in for post-Irene to help communities that now we're wanting to keep, or at least out of the House anyway, to help municipalities as they start to deal with the cost and the applications that they're going to need to be doing in that other, roughly in our community. I do agree. I think if, just out of memory too, it was about 20%, and I know Franklin County's ag was probably the highest at 60. So I think one of the things that we do with the resources, meaning your dollars and your tax dollars and the support, you know, sometimes you got to look to tackle the problem first at its largest chunk. You know, if you don't have enough dollars to do everything everywhere all the time, you got to do where it's the most significant that's happening and concentrate on getting that down and then keep working at it. This is going to take a long, long time. One of the things I wanted to step up to Mike and say is also, you know, Mike Winslow lives in my district, and a few other lake scientists who have been on this topic for a very, very long time. And it's just an absolute joy to have so many lake scientists within your own community. And sometimes we forget that even if we were able to turn off all the phosphorus running into the lake right now, at this moment, which we can't, there's still enough phosphorus from centuries of sediment and work that's in the lake already. For that to work itself out is going to take a long time, even if we didn't add any more. But the one thing to remember is phosphorus is a commodity. We used to ship it in here by the truckloads by railroad cars to help, and now we have an issue with it. It's wanted somewhere else, and so sometimes it's kind of a burden to have to clean it up, but in and itself, it is a commodity to be sold someplace else. And so we're just going to keep that in mind, that it's actually a very, very worthy product.
I want to follow up a little bit, and I think we need to have a conversation about changing the permit process to do some of the water quality improvements we had. And Adam mentioned, you know, if we found a spot along a bridge that was eroding and having a problem, maybe we spent some time there with design or whatever. But I remember how long it takes to fix a bridge. And I remember in Bristol, we had the twin bridges just outside of town on a high priority list for replacement. And that high priority was within 5 years. They kept getting put on that list for over 35 years. And then we had a major storm, damaged both those bridges. I think one was completely washed out, and the other one was damaged to the point where it couldn't be used. And they replaced those bridges in just a matter of months. They had to go through the same permitting process, the same design process, the same public input process. They just did it on a compressed time frame. But if it's going to take us 20 years or 10 years just to design a system to get replaced and then try to figure out where the funding is going to come from, we're not going to achieve the goals that we've set out in this water quality bill. So we're going to have to take a look, a hard look, at the permitting process for doing some of these kind of projects, because on the one hand it sounds like because we're going to do more permitting, it's going to take longer to do the kind of projects we have. So I'm concerned about that. And I think we all ought to be having a conversation around how long it takes to get something done.
Thanks, Harvey. Bridges. Where's Bill? Bill's still here? Yes, he always asks me about the bridges. Our bridge out here in Addison County, the town of Addison, they, you know, would have taken, like you said, it had already been in many, many years. And with all in, it was an incredible, incredible process. I don't recommend it, though, for people. But, oops, am I doing that? But you're right about the Accelerated Bridge Program came into existence when I was in transportation, and the build design process came in, things that help to make things go faster. And the Accelerated Bridge process started about, and Adam, I'm looking at you because you're 4 or 5 years ago? Right. And looking at actually closing the area in a lot of ways of how do you get this done faster. And it's really making a difference in the amount of time and you know, the amount of pain within the community and the business to have to deal with it being closed or not closed. And so they've made some significant upgrades to how they do business within VTrans in the last 5 years, and Harvey's mentioning, and those bridges in Bristol, after Irene, I called the representatives from Bristol that early morning and thought, did it fall down? Because maybe I could go out there and jump on it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to, do you have a quick question? Because we're getting ready to close down here.
Pam Stonick with the Conservation District out of Middlebury. I think in this whole discussion, we've lost sight of how much erosion is naturally occurring. And naturally occurring just isn't in the formula. This one has, this sector has 40% in this sector. And when we first started this conversation decades ago, there was this whole thing of, there was this whole concept of, well, all these things are happening anyway, but people are accelerating the process. But we've kind of lost that. We've lost that baseline of how much erosion would be happening. It rained before we got here. There was sediment going in the lake before we got here, but we've lost that out of the equation.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for the wonderful information and the active communication. And just tell you that the next breakfast is on April 4th at the Congregational Church in Weybridge. And remind you all again about the Agricultural Appreciation Dinner Dance on April 16th. Love to see you come. And if anybody can stay and help us tear the tables down and chairs, that would be really great. Thank you. Thank you, Grange, for hosting.